I've been collecting more data on these kittens that we have.
I didn't realize you were doing data collection on your kittens.
Yes. Well,
Hopefully there aren't any samples involved, Thomas.
well, there are samples in a way. It's every single night is a new experiment on what they can do to keep me awake at night.
So they are disrupting your normal sleep cycle then?
Oh, yes. It's like if it's not the 2 a.m. wrestling match, it's
Right.
the early morning wind sprints up and down the hall.
Yes.
Or that finding that one cat toy somewhere that makes the most possible noise.
Right. Now, do you have the door closed to your sleeping area?
No, they've got free access, so they're all over us. And with 4 cats now, I think like we said before, I think that's crossing the line. I think with 4 cats, the probability of one of them is going to be getting into trouble is very close to a 1-to-1 probability.
Yes. Plus, you're outnumbered.
Yes.
So
it certainly feels that way.
Yeah. So when there's votes that come up and stuff, you're up against a strong alliance. Yeah. You have to. Your problem is you don't have a clear delineation with your sleeping area from the rest of your household.
No, that's true.
We quickly found that if we didn't do that, then we were going to be overrun with cats throughout the evening because they're often nocturnal, right? So most of their high calisthenic activity is over the course of your sleeping time. So
well, the older cats sleep through the night every night. It's just these young kids
right
go for a couple hours and then decide it's playtime.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, is it a happy moment when they wake you up and you're like, "Oh, kitty," or are you kind of a grumpy Gus when you get roused from your sleepy?
Take a guess.
I'm gonna go grumpy Gus.
Yeah. Well, they'll grow out of it, I'm sure, but at the moment they're a bit annoying.
Yeah. Well, what can I tell you, man? Close your door and then you're all set.
Yeah, but then you don't have that cuteness. So.
Well, you have it the rest of the day. You just don't have it while you're sleeping.
Yeah. There's been a few times where they've been chucked out and the door's been closed. So.
Chucked out.
Yes.
How does one chuck a cat? I say that facetiously because I have also chucked a cat, but we should say Two Big Geeks does not condone the harming of cats or any other.
It's a very careful and gentle process.
Yes.
Of cat chucking.
Nice. Well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that. So last time we were talking about this big space rock.
Oh yeah, Oumuamua.
Now, why is it so coolly named?
Because it's cool.
No, but like, who came up with that? Like, what's the origination?
I don't know who came up with it, but it's a Hawaiian word.
Okay.
It means scout.
Scout. Oh,
Yes.
Of course it does, because the vegans from Lyra sent it as a scout ship to detect our civilization level. So you were excited about this recently again because there's some new data on its size, on its ratio.
Yeah, they were measuring its light curve. You can't image it directly because it's too small and far away, but you can measure the brightness of the light that's reflected off of it.
Right.
And from that, you can discern physical aspects of the rock itself. And it has a very distinct light curve, apparently, which indicates that it has that it's tumbling end over end and has a height to width ratio of roughly 10-to-1.
So you sent this to me, and my immediate response was, well, okay, there's the 2001 Space Odyssey monolith. And then a couple days later, dude,
Yeah.
our favorite geek of all time, Randall Monroe,
Yep.
chimes in with XKCD 1919, in which he makes the exact same observation and throws down a Weird Al reference in the same comic. So I'm like, dude, if there's not absolute proof that he's listening to the Two Big Geeks podcast, I don't know, like, we're not going to get anything more direct than that.
Keep dreaming.
So
Keep dreaming.
I was very happy to see that one.
Yeah, so it's an unusual shape, to put it mildly. It's a lot longer than it is wide. So it's shaped like a big cigar tumbling through space, through interstellar space, coming through our solar system and passing out again. That's, it's got all the astronomers talking about that. And some of them are trying to figure out, can we definitively say this is not a alien megastructure?
Right.
They can't definitively rule it out, but I mean, they're trying to come up with the natural explanations.
Yes.
The problem with this particular shape of an asteroid is that we know about tens of thousands of asteroids in our current solar system, and none of them are shaped like this.
Right. Right. So this is not a natural occurrence.
No, that's not the conclusion you can come to. It's different than what we have observed thus far, and so they have to come up with a new natural explanation to how this could have formed that way. One thing that can be pointed out is that all the asteroids in our solar system have been bouncing around inside our solar system for billions of years.
Right.
So there may be some sort of process that tends to round off the edges, so to speak.
Oh, right. So like when you are cleaning an entire bag of potatoes and you put it in a bag and you shake it in the river, all the potatoes are banging up against each other. And so there's going to be a natural smoothing.
Right. Whereas this object, for all we know, could have been ejected very early in a planetary forming process and had been traveling through interstellar space for billions of years. So it's certainly possible that it's not unusual to see a oddly shaped rock in interstellar space, where it might be more unusual to see it within a solar system.
Right.
So it gives us more things to think about, which is
Right.
the best part of science.
No, it's a lot of productive distraction away from the fact that it's shaped like a Star Destroyer.
It's not shaped like a Star Destroyer. It's shaped like the Battlestar Galactica or something like that.
You mean a less imposing?
Not as triangular.
Not as triangle. Okay, right. Or a huge eggplant emoji.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, fantastic.
So it continues to be an interesting object, although this is our best look at it. It's rapidly receding away from the solar system. So
Yes, true.
We're not going to actually be able to look at it any closer than what we just have done. So we're just going to have to wait for the next one to come through. And as anyone who's read Rendezvous with Rama knows, that the Ramans always do everything in threes.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say, Tom, is what is your reaction going to be the next time this happens and we have similar, if not identical, observations, right? Same trajectory, same shape, same characteristics. I mean, that would be, fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on, I don't know, somebody else.
Well, if we catch it in time,
right?
Let's take a closer look at it.
Ooh, could we catch it?
It depends.
No, physically, could we catch it?
Depends how big it is.
Like, if everybody on the planet was like, all right, you know what, this is humanity's top priority, we want to catch the next interstellar asteroid on this trajectory, would we even be able to do it? Like, do we have what would our best effort be to like catch that?
It'd probably be very difficult considering it's coming in at very high speeds. I mean, there are hypothetical plans for someday to capture asteroids and put them into useful parking orbits so they can be mined,
Parking orbits.
I mean, theoretically, it's possible if you attach a large engine to it, so you can change its velocity.
Do we even have anything that goes as fast as that asteroid is going? That is escape velocity?
No.
So even if we wanted to, with current technology, we couldn't catch up to an asteroid going that fast.
Not without a lot of lead time,
right?
Advance warning,
right,
to get ready for it.
All right. So the whole Bruce Willis fantasy of we're going to throw a few asteroids on astronauts on top of this rock is not going to happen. Could we shoot like a harpoon at it that like ejected like a big balloon and slowed it down? You
really want to crack it open and see what's inside, don't you?
I kind of do, dude.
No, it's just a rock. It's just a rock.
That's what they say.
Also what they say is extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence.
Oh, is that what they say?
Yes. So if you want to imagine that it's a alien megastructure, you got to find a lot more compelling evidence to come to that belief.
Well, I think conclusion requires a much higher bar than speculation.
Correct.
See, the problem, the Occam's razor, I think, is a two-edged tool in that, on the one hand, most of the time, it's going to be very useful and keep you from wasting your attention down rabbit holes that don't apply and that have low probability.
Mhm.
Give me the common sense, what's the most likely scenario? What you lose, though, is that in the few percent of cases where there actually is something revolutionary or world-turning going on, you'll always miss it if you cut it with Occam's razor, right? And so it's like, no, you don't want to conclude the least likely scenario. However, if you get in the habit of always excluding the low probability events, you'll always miss them, right? So you have to like inject that level of, I think, imaginative speculation in order to keep the Occam's razor of evidence-based inquiry honest.
Yeah.
I think that was the kind of the point I took from XKCD 1919. You have cue ball and his and the other one. What is the other one's name, by the way? The girl with the hair.
Megan?
Megan, thank you. Yeah, arguing back and forth, about this very thing.
Yeah.
With cue ball playing the devil's advocate.
Well, it's always good to have a little imagination for these things, to keep in mind the more fanciful possibilities.
Absolutely. We like fanciful possibilities.
But you can't lose yourself. You have to always keep yourself grounded with evidence.
Evidence. We were talking about evidence at the very tail end of our last discussion, Thomas.
Okay, how so?
We were speculating. We were wrapping up our discussion about death, which I know you really enjoyed, and we were talking about the pattern of the self repeating and manifesting in different ways as a possible theoretical underpinning of something like reincarnation.
All right.
And you're like, yeah. But we always, and I was like, yeah, you have to be a good scientist, you'll be open to new evidence, incorporate that, and then, see how it is going forward. And you're like, yeah, evidence.
Yep.
There's a thing with the scientific method that I've always, one of the two shortcomings of the scientific method I've felt in terms of the acquisition of knowledge for me is that it requires the objective outside of yourself corroboration by many different sources when you're making a conclusion based on evidence. Like you can do an experiment and say, hey, look, I found this amazing new law of physics in my laboratory and publish a paper on it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really mean much unless it can be replicated thousands and thousands of times, right?
Right.
People don't just discover things and then we just go on with it. It gets, because you have to make sure that there wasn't anything funky about your experiment. You want to tease out all of the subjective variables that may have been imparting that. And that's served us very well.
Right.
Right. It's been the underpinning of all technology and science and reason, and all that. The thing though, you can't contribute into that collective pool of evidence is the evidence of your own personal experience. Like say you were taking a walk through the woods by yourself and you closed your eyes and you touched a tree and you just had this transcendent feeling that you couldn't put into words, but it had like a really profound moving effect on you. Like I'm sure this has happened to you many times, Tom, when you're taking a walk and communing with the trees. Like that's real. The fact that you had that experience and that feeling is absolutely real and valid. However, how could you ever contribute that personal experience to the collective pool of evidence? I mean, you could describe it, but I guess what I'm getting at is that the more personally attuned the evidence that we collect as individuals is to our own apparatus, the harder it is to contribute it to the collective pool of objective evidence, even though it's still valid, right? And so when I talk about like I don't meditate because I read a paper on it and that says it's effective for blah 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 blah. I meditate because I have a consistent, repeated personal experience of a feeling and then its practical effect on my life. And that's totally logical for me to do, even though it's not based on the scientific method, which requires this kind of external objectification.
The fact that personal experience is rejected from the scientific method is a feature, not a bug.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And so I don't mean to criticize it. Again, I'm not criticizing the scientific method. I mean, I believe in climate change, Tom. I'm not going off the rails here. But it's a limitation of the tool, of its ability to know and acquire knowledge. It can't breach that gap into personal experience. Therefore, it's not going to be the comprehensive tool for everything.
Yeah, well, that's why we have philosophers. That's why we have theologians. I mean, that's why we have other people who explore the human experience that don't necessarily delve in the ways of science.
Yes. And I would also say we also have every individual on the planet. It's not like, oh, we have science and then we have a few people in an ivory tower who can, explore the other realms of existence, and then they'll, send it back down to us. I think that one of the tendencies when you have a really excellent tool for knowing the world, like the scientific method, is that you over apply it to different situations. It's so good for so many things that the knee-jerk reaction when something else comes up is to apply it, and then draw a conclusion from that, and then apply it, and then draw, So to be able to tease out where the limitations are of when and how it should be applied, I think is difficult. I think it's kind of like you call it the church of knowledge. You go to the university, you attend the services, the classes, you go to the seminars, listen to the great prognosticators at the pulpit. And this is the key to everything. This is, at its most extreme, these are things like the singularity, technology and reason and logic and education are going to solve everything.
Yeah. Well, I think as we've established over the last year of podcasting here, that you're a lot more comfortable browsing through the fluffy avenues of human experience than I am.
Right. But, to be fair, these other ways of knowing the universe suffer from as much the same. They have the same potential to suffer from the same fault of over application.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yep.
Like you can see a crack or a limitation or somewhere where the scientific method can't be applied, and then come up with a different method and then just overapply that. Right. It does, just because there is some alternative doesn't mean that like you can all of a sudden discount the vast sum of human knowledge that makes conclusions about the planet warming and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Well, there you go, Tom.
Okay.
Oh, so why did I bring that up?
It's always a good question.
Because we were talking about evidence and reincarnation. I didn't want to come off like, oh, well, I believe in X, Y, Z simply because it flies in the face of science. Like, I feel like the value of personal experience, particularly when it comes to discerning these like higher questions, like the ultimate nature of reality and myself and the universe.
Yeah.
That personal experience really needs a foothold in the door. Not to like stomp all over science and reason with its muddy boots, but to be able to kind of like just be part of the conversation at the table.
Even though personal experience is highly, highly subjective and incredibly unreliable.
Well, yes, which is why you need repeated personal experience, right?
From different people.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. There you go.
So we have a bit of a anniversary with this episode.
We do. My computer has been not crashing for 3 weeks now. So
that's pretty significant. No, I mean
time to celebrate
with our podcast. We've been doing this for a year now.
Yes. So what was the exact date of our episode 1 release? What is our actual?
It was the
anniversary date. It should say on the website.
It was the 4th of December, I believe.
Okay. So this is. And can I say, I love the fact that we're on episode 24 as the last episode. That is like one of the most satisfying numbers. I really like it. It's like divisible by so many different numbers, right?
Yeah.
It's very cool. So I'm happy plus it kind of shows that even though we haven't hit exactly every 2 weeks, we've been fairly productive.
Yeah. Right? Surprising.
Yeah.
I've been enjoying it. I hope you have been enjoying it as well.
Absolutely. I hope our listeners have been having a good time as well. I wanted to, I guess I want to take a small opportunity to ask our listeners to send us any reflection, comments, or feedback, or requests for future topics, that kind of inputty thing, either on the Reddit or the Twitter or the Facebook or whatever, to see how their reactions have been. I mean, these are our pioneer fans, Tom. So we want to custom contour our future direction towards the responsive needs of our key users.
Yes, we are very grateful to our users thus far. But Originally, when we started this a year ago, back last December, my original goal was let's do this for a year and see where we are.
Right. So it has been really nice working with you, Tom, and I hope you have a great rest of your life. Good luck with the kiddies, and we will see you in the stars. All right.
Well, I was just about to say I was fairly happy with where we were and wanted to find out if you want to keep going.
Yeah, of course Tom, I committed to episode 100, I think, back in, I can't remember what episode it was, but
back in the early days when you weren't so grizzled and wise with the rigors of podcasting.
Do you think we've changed personally? That was one sort of question I would have if there's any listeners that want to chime in through any channel is if they've noticed any particular any kind of change over the course of our run thus far, whether it's from what we're talking about or how we're talking about it or character, feel or change or etc. It's sort of interesting to tease out. Do you feel like there have been any major changes over the course of the season? As we wrap up season 1?
It's hard for me to say. You know, human experience is so subjective. It's kind of hard for me to analyze that personal data.
Huh. You know, it's funny. We've never touched upon the subjectivity of personal experience before. It's might be a fruitful point of discussion for the future.
Yeah, I think we've figured out where each of us stands on the spectrum of subject matter which we cover.
Yeah, the one thing that feels like it's changed for me is that even though I don't have a much greater sense of what we're going to talk about in terms of topics, I feel more comfortable that when we talk, we'll be able to converse in a somewhat interesting way. Like, I remember there being a high level of anxiety, at least personally, in episodes 0 through, I don't know, 5 or 6 maybe? Mm-hmm. Of like, okay, we have a topic, but then, what else are we going to talk about? And then we had, I think it was Silly Town, where in the middle of that episode, I felt like my mind completely went off the rails. and yet we still had we
still kept going.
Yeah, we still kept going, and it turned into a cool episode. So I was like, oh, okay, if we sort of completely run out of pre-planned objective topic fare, then we'll still be able to kind of wing it. And I do like the fact that some of our episodes are more structured in terms of, okay, let's take a long time and detailedly explore a particular topic versus just kind of riffing back and forth on lighter stuff.
Yeah, I do like to have a kind of vague plan about what we intend to talk about, but I also really enjoy being surprised every time we turn on the microphones.
Yeah,
because that's what life is like. It's every day can be a surprise. It doesn't have to be so planned, but it's been fun. I've enjoyed it. I'm big thank you to all the people who have joined us so far, especially the folks that have been active on the Reddit. That's always fun to read their comments every time we put out a new episode. Special thank you to Loonling on the Reddit, who was very helpful to me as far as setting up the subreddit itself as one of our mods.
That's right. Way back in the day, mm-hmm. we were total subreddit newbies.
Mm-hmm. He was very helpful. We thank him.
Yes, and a special shout out to our super fan. She knows who she is, who endured the rawest of initial edits and provided us lots of excellent quality feedback. So, yes. Cheers to that.
Yes.
So, is any particular kind of like activity or ceremony for anniversary here? Do you want to what do we want to do? Step on a couple of broken glasses, or what's the story, Morning Glory?
I don't know. Is there a tradition for podcasters?
I think we're sort of making this up as we go along. So
okay.
Yeah. So we had sort of tossed around the idea a few episodes of. I had sort of informally referenced the Mount Rushmore of geek.
Yes.
And you had mentioned that might be a fruitful area to explore. So, looking back on this past year, Tom, we could sort of take this opportunity. This is the first time we've ever had an anniversary, right? Mm-hmm. So we could sort of think about which geeks have had And there's a lot of little meta threads here, so please control me.
If possible.
Yeah. We could talk about which geeks have had the biggest influence on the podcast in the last year, or which ones have had the most caught our attention the most personally over the past year.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, I don't think we are poised to do a objective rank ordering of greatest geeks of 2017 outside of our personal area of interests. Nor do I think we could do greatest geeks of all time objectively. Because I guess I want to throw out that huge caveat, because there's going to be, if we do sort of engage this kind of like Geek Hall of Fame thing, we're going to miss a lot of people who would be on this list objectively, but we can only sort of, pluck out a few highlights from the grand swath of history and pop culture today as well. Would you kind of concur with that approach, or?
Okay, sure. Yeah. Okay. I'm just going along for the ride.
Okay, rocking. I guess the other sort of thing is, what are we going to call this? Because I have mentioned the Mount Rushmore of geek.
Mm-hmm.
However, I did see a documentary on Mount Rushmore itself recently.
Yeah.
It was a segment in one of my favorite TV shows, by the way, new shows called Adam Ruins Everything. I don't know if you've ever seen this.
I have not.
Showtime.
No.
By Adam Cornover, one of my new favorite geeks. But he goes over things you might not know, and sort of deconstructs and bursts the balloon on certain understandings in history. Like, he talks about security theater, which I know was a topic of yours a few episodes ago, and sort of deconstructs the myths around Thanksgiving, the myths about the economy, and and different sort of things. And so he had an episode on Mount Rushmore. And to put it briefly, we know that the U.S. has a not positive history in terms of land acquisition and its relationship to Native Americans.
True, yes.
Yes, and Mount Rushmore is a pretty terrible example of this behavior. So I would not want to associate that name with our podcast Geek Hall of Fame sort of structure. So I could go with Mount Olympus of Geek. I could go with 2-Bit Geek Hall of Fame. But I think I'd like to drop the Rushmore-ness from it. I don't know how you feel about that.
Hey, that's your prerogative.
Well, it's both of our prerogatives, right? You're half of TBG.
I'm happy with that.
So what do we call it?
Hall of Fame.
Okay, the 2-Bit Geeks Hall of Fame.
Yes.
Okay, the next delineation then would be between history and 2017.
Mm-hmm.
As we're in the, if this is the startup routine, then we have all of human history up until 2016 to consider as well. So do we sort of have like a one-shot inaugural class where we have maybe more entrants than we might typically nominate in for 2-Bit Geeks of the Year in addition to 2017, or do we just do like past year? How you feel? What are you feeling, brother?
All of human history is quite a long time. Well, what about...
Well, like, just to give you a sense of scope, Tom?
Yeah.
Archimedes was a potential candidate on my list.
Okay. Well, I would be interested in having Archimedes be in there if he was somehow influential to you personally as part of your human experience, not just to human civilization as a whole. Because it's the 2-Bit Geeks Hall of Fame. It's not the wide world of human interest Hall of Fame.
Right. Okay. Yes. So there has to be sort of a personal flavor to the selection. Yes. That'll actually make it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Well. So Tom, with that, I can't imagine the first 2-Bit Geek Hall of Fame entrant being anybody other than Randall Munroe. I mean, he is like the ultimate expression. Dude, when we were talking about this podcast,
mm-hmm.
one of my serious ideas was to review every XKCD ever and just go through it. And he has been so consistent over time. His the work he does with Thing Explainer and with What If, his ability to overcome that curse of knowledge and to explain things and to inject humor, and that he's done it over such a long period of time, and that he has such a depth of technical understanding, and yet an obviously expressive joy of what he's doing.
Yeah.
and the perfect time, right, on the internet,
So for those not familiar with his work, Randall Munroe is the author of the webcomic called XKCD, who we've referenced quite often in this podcast. And actually, in our very first episode, we went on a long discussion about one of his magnum opuses, the timeline of Earth's climate.
Yep, and he is one of many magnum opus that he has authored. I personally, I kind of feel like that, if I'm walking into the multi-pillared 2-Bit Geeks Hall of Fame, which is, by the way, where are we going to construct this building, Tom? Do you have
It'll be constructed in our minds.
A geography in mind? No, really? Okay, all right. But what if we're like what if we're like the last remnant of Terran civilization, and someone discovers this, and they have like a bunch of resources out on Narv 4, and they're for their senior thesis project, they're going to build the 2-Bit Geeks Hall of Fame, right?
All right, so we need to inscribe this on a gold record and send it off somewhere.
I think so.
Yeah.
Well, there's some XKCD where he speculates, at some point someone's going to say, "May the Force be with you," and it's going to be the last time it's ever said. and the person they're talking to is going to be like, what did you say? Like, I don't know. It's something my grandfather used to say. As culture slowly peters out. So yes, we may be the breadcrumb on the final trail of Terran interest.
So you're nominating Randall Munroe for your
I'm installing Randall Munroe into like a central dais in the circular Mount Olympus looking like grand pillared structure. I don't know if it's just that I mentioned Archimedes, but now I'm imagining the 2-Bit Geeks Hall of Fame as an open-aired Mount Olympus Greek kind of structure.
So you're rejecting Archimedes,
yes,
for Randall Munroe.
Well, yes, but you go up, and then I'd imagine like you go into this kind of circular, open-aired chamber. I guess a little bit like how Boromir finds the blade that cut the ring, the shards of Narsil. Mm-hmm. That kind of that hall sort of feel in Rivendell.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of that's what I'm feeling. Only a bit more bright. Rivendell was a little dark in that scene. I'm thinking more like white pillars and flowing robes and Bill and Ted popping in for a little visit, that kind of thing.
Okay. Well,
how do you feel about that? I was expecting no pushback on the Randall nomination, by the way.
No, I support that nomination without objection.
Okay.
My only concern would be if we're talking about all-time Hall of Fame, that he's still a fairly young person, but his volume of geekiness is so profound,
right,
that it might overwhelm that concern and punch his ticket right to the Hall of Fame without any hesitation.
Yeah, I mean that's my immediate go-to. If you talk about my personal list, yeah. He's number one. Okay, good. I was hoping not to spend too much political capital on that one vote, Tom. So I don't know. We'll see. Okay. Now I did Randall. Now your turn.
My turn. Okay. I'm going to pick someone who was very influential to me when I was a young fellow, and who was very influential to a lot of other people who eventually became geeks as well. My pick is Martin Gardner.
I don't even know the name. I'm really excited to learn.
You never heard of Martin Gardner? This is someone who had a profound influence on me when I was a child.
Okay, I vaguely know the name, but I could really not put it anywhere.
I would guess that if you talk to a lot of geeks, scientists, or mathematicians of our generation or older, you might find a lot of people that would cite Martin Gardner as a huge influence on them.
Okay,
he was a writer. He for 25 years he wrote a column for the Scientific American magazine called Mathematical Games. He wasn't a scientist, he wasn't a mathematician, but he was a popularizer of both science and mathematics.
Okay.
And translating the complex world of those subjects to the average reader. And he brought the magic of human knowledge to a wider audience in a way that shaped a lot of people, including myself, as far as how much joy they derived out of science and mathematics.
Wow. So you read him as a child as he was publishing in Scientific American.
My father, who was a science educator, had a long-time subscription to Scientific American magazine. And so we had stacks and stacks of them in the house when I was growing up. And the mathematical games column was certainly my favorite feature of that magazine because it was a column that was very approachable to the layperson, to someone who wasn't a scientist or a mathematician, and presenting subjects, especially things like recreational mathematics, to the layperson, so they could share in the joy of scientific discovery and ingenuity.
Right.
He significantly popularized a lot of mathematical and scientific subjects that we now are widely known, but he was the originator of basically discovering them and bringing them to a wider audience. Like, for example, the artwork of M.C. Escher.
Oh, that is so funny that you mentioned Escher. So as you were talking about bringing the joy of math to a wider audience, I was like, oh, I forgot somebody on my list, and I'm like, I can't remember the name. You know how I can never remember a name, right? So I'm like writing it down as you're speaking. I'm saying, oh, the cool puzzle guy.
It was Martin Gardner who brought M.C. Escher to wider appreciation.
That is fantastic.
He was a fairly unknown artist until his work appeared in the pages of Scientific American.
So I don't know if this is the same time. It sounds like it probably is, but when I was like 6 to 10, 11-ish, we used to go to the Boston Science Museum.
Yep.
On the third Friday of each month, because they showed a classic sci-fi movie in one of their theaters. And so we saw like Forbidden Planet and The Fly,
nice,
and Them. A lot of Brother X's favorite movies, by the way.
Right, of course.
And so then we would go to this is like late 70s, somewhat early 80s. And then we would go to the gift shop, and kids today won't understand this, but there was nothing digital in the gift shop at that point. So the big draws for me were astronaut ice cream, which is like the freeze dried ice cream, a gyroscope. So I got a lot of good time off the gyroscope, and M.C. Escher. And so there were like books and books, like really tall books of M.C. Escher drawings. And I mean, if you've never seen M.C. Escher, there's just incredible creative expressions of symmetry and mathematical precision, and I'm not explaining it well, but he's very playful, kind of, and really engrossing to like a young sort of mind. And so he was all over. MC Escher was all over Boston Science Museum. So was that the same time when Gardner was writing, late 70s, early 80s?
Yes, it was. Okay. I believe Gardner first wrote about Escher in the 60s, so we have him to thank for bringing Escher to the world.
That is awesome. Is his stuff still available online, Martin Gardner? Like, could you like go through his math games and all that?
He's published a lot of books.
That
are basically collections of his writings and his collections of mathematical puzzles and stuff like that. I was just reading about him earlier today. I just discovered that I had access to the entire Scientific American archive through my university account, which I'm really excited about because now I can download all these past mathematical games columns and read them again.
Sweet. Well, maybe we can link to some if there's anything available public, any of his writings.
But another famous geek subject that he brought to a wider audience was John Conway's Game of Life. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Again, I vaguely know it. What is?
It is a cellular automata.
Okay.
It is a kind of a very simple simulation with very simple rules that when you let it run, it creates immense complexity.
Okay.
And I call it the Game of Life because it mimics a lot of ideas or structures of life itself, but has very simple mathematical rules to it. It's very popular with computer programmers in particular because it's a very easy program to write in any kind of language that you have, but it can generate just magical and surprising results.
Wow. I'm kind of surprised I don't know this. Seems like right up my alley.
Well, you should have been reading Martin Gardner when you were a kid, because he was writing about this a lot in the 70s. And when I was writing my first computer program was one of the first things I wanted to do was create a version of Conway's Game of Life on the computer.
What were you coding in, by the way?
At that time, it was just BASIC.
Yeah. It's funny when you mention like Escher and this Game of Life, and it makes me think of Mandelbrot as well, who popularized fractal imagery.
Yep, Mandelbrot is another one that I first learned about in the pages of Scientific American.
Okay, so like the unifying theme here that is really interesting is this kind of joyful, playful game approach to math.
Yes,
and utilizing that approach to the subject in order to create more engagement. Because it's funny, math can often feel like a dry, intimidating, intellectually aloof subject, and it is incredible how you can take some really basic understanding and have a lot of interesting fun with it. There's a math Olympiad that happens every year for high school students. It's just like 24 like multiple choice questions, and it's interesting because it doesn't require any advanced knowledge of like calculus or any syntax terms beyond like real basic like high school algebra, and yet the problems can get very complex and require real ingenious solutions. And it's interesting, but you only sort of engaged. You only do that math. The kids who are drawn to that are the kids who do really, 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 really well in math classes in high school. And in other words, it's not part of the normal curriculum typically in a school. Like to reference one of my favorite Tenet episodes, 42. It's like, don't they teach recreational mathematics in classes anymore?
Yeah.
Which reminds me of another one of my favorite current geeks in pop culture. And so I was going to nominate this person later, but just thematically, she fits right in. Vi Hart.
Oh, absolutely. And she's absolutely a spiritual successor in a way to Martin Gardner.
Okay.
I mean, there's a lot of geek YouTubers that are in the same vein, like Brady Heron's Numberphile and Matt Parker, but Vi Hart especially is clearly influenced by I think Martin Gardner in a lot of ways.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Vi Hart, we can link to her YouTube channel. But basically, she calls herself a mathemusician.
Yes.
So she's a gifted mathematician, but also a gifted musician, and just incredibly playful and unboundedly expressive with the topics that she covers, and really into Sharpies and high-speed video. She has like a particular video style, which is fairly engaging and totally righteous in terms of like gender equity in the geek world and in math and all that, and very iconoclastic as well.
Yep.
I think sometimes I find a lot of her videos very empowering. In terms of, it's like, we're still trying to right this ship of civilization so that we are, fair to all people regardless of gender. And she's several that where she's just sitting there bored in math class, and she doodles, and then she goes off on this incredible exploration of some topic or whatever. And it's
she's definitely on my short list for Geek Hall of Fame as well.
Sweet. So can we maybe induct all these at the same time, or maybe just a couple of them? Maybe just Martin and Vi.
Yeah, I think so. I think that they're a good pair together, because one of Vi Hart's most famous videos is on her video on hexaflexagons. I'm sure you've seen that one.
So she has one that just came out a couple weeks ago. It's a more refined, the definitive guide on how to make a hexaflexagon.
Right. Well, hexaflexagons itself were something that were originally appeared in the mathematical games column by Martin Gardner. He was the one that popularized it originally.
Awesome.
So that's a perfect pairing. I would induct both of them in together.
Excellent. We can put their chambers next to each other.
Yep. My particular favorite of Vi Hart's videos is her one on the 12-tone music system.
Oh, that is awesome.
Because it's just it's
Is that Mary Had a Laser Bat?
Yes, it's the brilliant marriage of mathematics and music is her unique talent, and it's excellent. It would be an excellent starting place for anyone exploring her videos.
Totally. Okay, so we will have a 12-tone piano and a collection and a interactive hexaflexagon station at Vi Hart's display, and a lot of Escher going on. Yeah, Archimedes and Mandelbrot and Escher, maybe we don't need to induct directly, but there's certainly when you start to peel off the tangents of influence, you get fairly broad.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll put those two forward, Martin Gardner and Weihart, and for induction.
Sweet. All right, we're up to 3. That's pretty good. I'm going down my list here, and yeah, so now I'm turning over in my mind the qualification you gave earlier of like personal influence versus simply objective greatest geeks.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to make a pretty strong pitch for Nikola Tesla.
Okay.
He didn't have any influence on me personally. I was not one of those geeks that was all into electrical engineering and deconstructed my toaster and all that.
Yeah, he's one of those people that, I'm aware of his achievements, but he doesn't have a profound influence on my daily geekiness, like the previous few people we've talked about.
Yeah, he has a really interest. I point him out not just because of his accomplishments, but because of his place in history and what we know about his personality. Like, I don't know if you've ever read the Oatmeal's comic on why Nikola Tesla was the greatest geek who ever lived.
No, I have not.
Okay, I will send you that. And if this makes the cut, we'll put it in the show notes. But he had a really interesting foil with Thomas Edison.
Yeah, right.
Where essentially Edison was a business-minded exploiter of geeks, and Tesla was the tinkerer in the laboratory who invented 100 million things. like he invented AC, alternating current,
yeah,
as well as a gajillion other things, and was very generous with his patents, and was always focused on discovering and inventing the next thing. Probably somewhat neuroatypical in terms of his sociability, sort of kept to himself. He had a notable relationship with pigeons towards the end of his life. So, I mean, you go over his work and his personal life, and this is a geeky guy,
yeah,
who is brilliant.
Yeah, certainly a modern day equivalent to him would be Elon Musk.
Yeah, in fact, I would say Tesla was probably more the extreme of having zero business sense and 100% technical. So, whichever brilliant technician is slaving away in one of Elon Musk's companies inventing all of these things, that's Tesla. like the modern day Tesla you won't learn about for another 100 years because he's not publicizing anything. Right?
Now what about Elon Musk? We've talked about him quite a bit in the past year.
I'm still I like following him, and we did touch upon briefly that he has that kind of unpolished realness to him in some respects, where he's not the greatest presenter in the world. He's obviously pushing forward a lot of different technologies and trying to address problems. He's got some good quotes on some philosophical topics like the simulation and all that. But I would vote to defer his nomination because I'm just not. I react differently to his business endeavors than I do his like pure geeky endeavors. I'm not.
I agree.
I want to say it in a fair way. I'm really hesitant to jump to conclusions on and criticize him for that. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're going to get stuff done in a meaningful way, it's got to manifest in the economy.
I would
in the
agree
real
with that.
world.
I think we should preserve for our Hall of Fame those individuals who share the joy of learning, or inspire the joy of learning in others. I don't think Elon does that. He's more of a entrepreneur, business person.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that he doesn't enjoy the joy of learning, or I mean, I don't know what is in his heart, right? Yeah. So I'm not going to pass conclusion based on that. But yeah, he doesn't move me. He has not yet I guess touched me. So if I'm going to go down that kind of pure road, then the greatest influence, at least for me, for my childhood, in terms of being a hero who embraced the sort of same feel of things that I did, is Weird Al Yankovic.
Of course, right.
I mean, in terms of contributions to the overall book of human knowledge, he's nowhere near some of the people that we've mentioned. Okay, he's not a Tesla, he's not a Martin Gardner, but I think I mentioned last episode, he was my friend on a lonely Saturday night on Dr. Demento. He was the first person I saw as a live musician. He's the first person who's, back then we were buying cassette tapes and then into CDs, but he was the first music that I purchased. But yeah, I just loved his sort of purity of humor, and just the fact that you could be clever and humorous, and that I think it was also the fact that until I discovered the Beatles, which was not until a few years after I had discovered Weird Al,
Mm-hmm.
I really did not like pop music. I was really, really disappointed when I would listen to a pop radio station and be like, that's all? That's what humanity has to offer to me for music? I'm like, wow, good job, humanity. and so to have somebody who was poking fun at what was being created, which just absolutely hit the sweet spot for me.
Yeah.
And he's had such a long career, and his content has always been very accessible. He's never sort of crossed the line of explicitness. He's like been very creative with his stuff, and so I can totally understand how he's not on anybody else's list, but personal influence, he's been pretty big for me.
Yeah, I can't say I have a lot of appreciation for Weird Al, but I'm happy to include him because I think he serves as a good reminder that geekiness is not just math and sciences, that there's more to it than that. Certainly the whimsical side of geekiness should be represented in our Hall of Fame.
Right. Awesome. Okay, so we can have his songs playing on a loop as the background the background as you're walking around the hall. Sweet. Oh wow, okay. Now that I don't know if you just did that for political purposes, Tom, because now that I've let Weird Al in, you could pretty much put anybody in, and I'm not gonna be able to object.
Oh, did I just make a horrendous mistake?
No. I'm saying that was a good move for you.
Okay, good.
Right? Now that I've what could I possibly object to now that you've allowed Weird Al into this hallowed company?
I'll put one other, let's say, giant of my childhood up for nomination.
Okay.
This is sort of related to what I just said about Weird Al not being math and sciences. This is someone else that has nothing to do with math and sciences, but it certainly has a lot to do with geekiness and certainly my development as a geek. And that was Gary Gygax.
I knew you were going to hit him.
Yeah. His influence went off like a bombshell in my childhood as the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons.
Who did he create it with?
His partner initially was Dave Arneson, and there's arguments to be made that Dave Arneson was actually had a bigger role in actually creating the first role-playing game, as it's understood today.
Okay.
But Gary Gygax was certainly the person that popularized it and brought it to the masses and did a lot of the early development on Dungeons and Dragons, and was basically the name you saw in all the books.
Right. Oh, yes. I always thought it was a fake name.
No, he was a real person. He sadly passed away a few years back, but he was a massive gamer geek and stumbled upon this game that Dave Arneson had put together, immediately recognized the fun potential of it, and published it in the early 70s as the original version of Dungeons & Dragons, and the rest is history from there. And that has had a massive impact on a whole generation of geeks, including myself.
Yeah, and I really wonder if there would be a robust analog response to the digital age today that we see today, if it wasn't for those foundations being laid at the same time that the digital age was just coming into existence.
Yeah.
It's like if you didn't have that foil, would there have been other opportunities? Yeah, it's funny. He definitely indirectly influenced me in terms of, it sounds like you played a little bit more D&D than I did as a kid. I mean, I definitely played.
I played a lot.
And initially, I didn't have the patience for it.
Yeah.
So my friends would get together, and after like 10 minutes, I would be running around the room. So my intention was an issue. And then a little later, I played, and unfortunately, I chose as for my character a bard.
Oh, God.
which I've seen you tweet about recently, is perhaps not the most revered of the.
It's not one of my favorite character archetypes. No.
Yes. So I mean, if you're gonna character play a bard, you gotta pop out a song every once in a while, and there aren't a lot of excellent opportunities for that in a party that is engaged in a lot of combat. So Yeah, so let's just say that I did not become the favorite teammate in my party, and so it's quite possible that the party turned on the Bard a few times.
Yeah.
Just let me put that out there.
But Gygax himself has, beyond gaming, has had a massive influence on geek culture, whether it be movies and TV and video games and stuff like that. His influence is as being an inspiration to a whole generation of geeks growing up. The people who are now grown up are creating things directly inspired by his influence.
And it sort of happened at the sort of Tolkien Renaissance. The first Tolkien Renaissance happened in the 60s,
Right.
with the books. That sort of predates Gygax and D&D by about I don't know, a decade or so.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then so the sort of mythical fantasy world evolution is sort of tied together like that. But no, it is funny. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before. It's not quite a straight linear evolution because even in I would say before, I don't know if my memory is complete here. If certainly by the time the Fellowship of the Ring movie came out, the dragons and swords and knights and medievalness sort of fantasy culture, when that movie came out, solidified its sort of mainstream acceptance.
Mm-hmm. Right.
But this was a definite subculture in the 80s. I mean, there used to be media reports of, let your kids play D&D and they're going to turn into, murderous humans.
Yeah. Yeah, the moral panic.
Exactly. Same scare with heavy metal music and that business. So it is kind of interesting that it sort of had to survive underground for a little while before it fully emerged. In no small part to Gary Gygax's continued efforts and influence.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So there's my next pick.
Gary into the league. So should we have a little set of miniatures and like a big plastic table with like a wipe off grease pen? You could sort of like, maybe pick up a game or two in his hall. I still have a half a dozen D&D type games in my storage closet. I have Gangbusters and Star Frontiers and Gamma World.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, dude, all those TSR originals.
Oh.
Are you a collector, Tom?
I think you might have. I think you might know the answer to that. If you want to get rid of them,
they are. I would probably. Yeah, you know what? I would be happy to give you. They're just taking up space on my shelf right now.
No, what you should do, you should bust them out and play them. That's what you should do.
Totally. I think I used to love getting these boxes of games and then reading about the characters and the rules and and the world. I think I did that more than actually play the game.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everyone does that. I mean, I'm not really actively playing at the moment, but I still read the books all the time. I get every single new book, D&D book that comes out. I can't resist it. I have a whole stack of them on my bedside table.
That's awesome.
So gaming in general and role-playing games specifically is a huge part of modern day geek culture. So
yes,
for his contributions to developing that, Gary Gygax is a giant.
Absolutely. Gosh, now that you've like opened up these different threads, I don't know which way to go here.
Do you got any one last name to throw in the pot?
God, I have like a half a dozen. Let me see.
We got to constrict it somehow to a small group, I think.
We do. So well, okay. Then let me just prune off a couple of minor threads here that you can further prune off by not existing later on if you desire. But the fact that you brought up that thread reminded me of, in terms of gaming and the subculture, underculture of D&D, etc.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you ever played Zork.
Oh yes, I've played Zork. Yes.
Okay, so for those who don't know, this was like the earliest version of a dungeon crawl game
On the computer, right?
On the computer, early '80s, and totally text based. And this will mean nothing if you hadn't seen it before. But it was magic at the time because it was a command line, and it would sort of give you a very brief description, like you're in the middle of a forest. There's a piece of parchment on the ground. That's all you had.
Yeah.
And then you could type in free text in English. I mean, big deal, right? Games have this like today, but this was unheard of at the time, and must have had some really clever programming to do some text analysis, and you would often get responses back from the computer like, "Oh, I don't understand what that word means," or "Could you clarify?" Whatever. But you could essentially interact with it from a free text and then explore this D&D type world, this fantasy world, this Zork, by the company Infocom. And I had like a dozen different Infocom titles, and it was just
That's a genre of gaming that has completely disappeared.
totally. So I'm sure you could probably play Zork online today.
You can, yes. I've revisited the game several times.
This is related to another big thread that I'm sure we'll explore further in future episodes, Tom. But it's like what Zork does and what D&D does sort of more broadly is that it provides just enough of a structural scaffolding of what you're focusing on and what the narrative story is that your imagination fills in the rest. Right?
Yeah.
And that is the appeal of it, is that it's more than nothing, because it's very difficult to just sort of riff on absolutely nothing. So it gives you something to hang your hat on, and yet it doesn't completely provide all of the fully fleshed out detail that your imagination has nothing to do. And so what's engaging about these experiences is that your imagination is actively engaged. And in an age today where our creative content is just poured into our brains without any effort whatsoever, in whatever 3D, high frame rate, completely fleshed out form, it's interesting and it's stimulating, but at the end of the day, I find it somewhat unsatisfying. And I think that that's the itch that it's not scratching, is that it's not engaging my imagination. If it's telling me absolutely everything, it's not engaging my imagination.
Right.
Like, this is why I love a really good descriptive poem, is that it gives you this, like, it sort of cuts through a really great poem, cuts through like the perfect thoroughfare around something that stimulates your imagination to where you can totally experience it just from that description, right? As opposed to seeing a 9,000 megapixel picture of a rose, you get this exquisite description of a rose. And so you can experience the thing in and of itself. So the Zork is what totally birthed that into my existence. Like, wow, you could have this experience and then stimulate in your own imagination and consciousness and understanding without it being, just spoon-fed to you. So I in terms of like, how do I make that a Geek Hall of Fame? I don't think I can, but it's just something you reminded me of.
Yeah, it's a certificate of recognition.
Yes. Another small certificate of recognition is for the authors of Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yeah, the Choose Your Adventure books, right? Yeah.
Which essentially, it's a second-person narrative where every few pages you make a decision and then you go off at a different arc of the story, which really came and went, right, in the 80s. It was like...
Yeah, once computer technology improved, all these things went by the wayside as completely unnecessary.
Yeah, and there were some really creative ways of again, engaging your imagination. And there were some spin-off series. There's one called Death Trap Dungeon by Ian Livingstone, which I think was one of the more popular D&D based Choose Your Own Adventures. But it was Choose Your Own Adventure plus you rolled a character at the beginning of the book. And so you would periodically encounter a combat and it would say, okay, you're going to fight the barbarian. And here's his armor class and here's his hit points. And then gave you this like micro system for executing the combat, which of course I would always fudge and assume that I won and then go on to the next decision point. But I remember that book in particular being something that really stimulated Mike. Like, wow, you could just have this like dungeon crawl, pure adventure, and that could be really engaging. So another certificate of achievement.
So by my reckoning, we have 5 people so far we've agreed upon for our inaugural class.
Okay.
Do we have any other further additions, or should we settle for this?
Okay, I'm without delving into each of these threads, I'm just going to tick off that Leonard Nimoy was a pretty strong consideration for me.
Okay.
As the sort of the Star Trek representative who crossed a lot of the series and yet didn't quite rise to the level of strong personal influence. But I just wanted to give him a brief shout out. Lisa Simpson and Hermione made my initial finalist list because I didn't know if we were going to go fictional.
Fictional characters, are they eligible? In that case, I'd put Doctor Who in there.
Okay, so I'm going to make a pitch then for Matt Smith.
Now, I would make a pitch for Tom Baker.
Oh,
When I was 10 years old, I wanted to be Tom Baker.
Right.
He was my absolute hero.
So I loved Tom Baker as a kid. So I gave a really long college try to some of the best Tom Baker episodes recently, and they just don't stand up to the test of time, I don't think, for my personal educational enjoyment. However, this is not an objective film analysis we're doing here, right? This is more like personal influences. So you were wearing the scarf. You had the bag of
Jelly Babies. Yep.
Jelly Babies.
He was my biggest hero when I was a kid, without a doubt.
Okay.
Just to see someone tackle problems just using his brain and not resorting to violence was a huge influence for me.
Yes. So Doctor Who production values aside, that is what I loved about Tom Baker, is that he was so in the face of like violent and serious situations, that he was so humorous and intelligent and compassionate and yet still alien. I thought he had this great injection of I'm still not totally human.
Mm-hmm.
So you got this kind of like, whoa, you're like staring into the cosmos bit of a feel. So by the same token, I loved Matt Smith and his evocation of the Doctor just because it was so full on, unapologetically whimsical and geeky. I mean, to the nth degree. I mean, the bow ties are cool. The fez is cool. I mean, when he gets the fez shot off his hat, that's like, to me, one of the greatest moments in Doctor Who history. It's just so evocative. And he had such a, like, spinning around like a top in the middle of the most, intensive situation. So Tom, how about this? How about in the Two Big Geeks Hall of Fame, we have Doctor Who, but the Doctor Who is this interactive exhibit where Tom Baker is reincarnating into Matt Smith. He's regenerating. I'm sorry, not regenerating. Regenerating into Matt Smith.
And all the other regenerations in between as well.
Yes, but the faces you're mostly seeing are those two.
Yeah.
Okay, sweet. Awesome. Because then we have a nod to the past and a nod to the new generation.
Excellent.
Cool.
So to sum up, the folks that we've thus far agreed upon for our inaugural class of the Two Big Geeks Hall of Fame are Randall Munro, the author of XKCD comic, Martin Gardner, the popularizer of mathematics and science, Vi Hart, the musical mathematician from YouTube. Math musician from YouTube. Weird Al Yankovic, the well-known, how would you describe him, song parody?
Satirist, pastichist, commentator on pop culture.
And Gary Gygax, the founder of a lot of geek culture, specifically Dungeons and Dragons.
That is a good group. To spin the who would you want to have dinner with, or who would you want to spend an evening on an island with? Who would you want to have a D&D session with? That would be a fun group.
Alrighty, so there we go. How do we make that official? We just fill out the paperwork and submit it.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
And maybe if we are doing this another year, we can do this again next December.
Totally. I really appreciate the Martin Gardner nomination. Not having vaguely been aware of him, and recently trying to think of ways in which math and mathematics can be engaged in a more playful, accessible way.
Mm-hmm.
He's a really good resource. I'm anxious to see if some of his stuff is available online.
Oh yeah, I mean he's published loads of books, so you can find them on Amazon.
Sweet.
Any final thoughts?
Okay, so we have
any final thoughts about the podcast in general, not necessarily the Hall of Fame.
Oh,
as a kind of year wrap up to finish the episode.
Well, Tom, and in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. So, not sure where I was going with that. Final thoughts as we wrap up and we look forward to another year. So, I think we've always said that discoverability is the main challenge of any podcast. So, if you are listening to this and you have enjoyed what you have heard, you are of course always welcome to support us on Patreon. But as important is to just spread the word and spread the love. Share it with your friends and social media compatriots, and let people know we exist.
Yes. I fully endorse what Ped is telling you. You should listen to him.
And I don't want to obligate people to engage with us on social media if that is not the extroverted thing that you like to do.
But we love it.
But I think we should just periodically mention that we are totally 100% open to hearing what people feel and think about what we're talking about, and we are always happy to engage with y'all on that level. So come around and say hello when you can.
Yep, you'll find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Reddit.
Ba-dum, ba-dum, ba-bum.
Excellent.
So do you need me to sing you a little musical outro, Tom, to put a bow on this?
No,
or?
I think we're covered on that account. I don't think we've got. I think the listeners have had their fill of your singing thus far this year.
The 2-Bit Geeks Hall
no.
of Fame. Okay. I was thinking maybe, Tom, in your editing spare time, you could do a clip highlight show of every time that I've ever sang. And maybe every time that I've ever butchered a word. And you could just all like put them like one right next to each other in rapid fire succession.
I think I've said before that could be spun off into its very own podcast in itself.
Yeah, I think we're probably generating 3 episodes every time we record, so you can...
So if anyone else wants to tackle that problem, they can get in touch with you and maybe set that podcast up. I've got my plate full already.
Yeah.
Hey everyone. As we finish out this first year of podcasting, Ped and I would like to thank each and every one of you for coming along with us on this ride. Your continued support has been truly appreciated. Thank you.